The biggest thing with Flaherty has always been untapped potential and just staying on the field.
Yes.
So for Jack Flaherty, we can go kind of back to the beginning here. Makes 28 starts as a rookie in 2018 and was excellent. 3.34 ERA, finishes 5th in Rookie of the Year voting. 2019 is really the season to focus on if you want to see the best of Jack Flaherty. He makes 33 starts that season with a 2.75 ERA, a whip of .968, which leads the National League. 6.2 hits per nine, also leads the National League. Strikes out 10.5 batters per nine, only walks 2.5, and allows just 25 homers in 196 innings pitched.
That year is so interesting. I looked at it pretty deep last night. He had a 4.17 ERA entering August. Like, he was having a mediocre year heading into the back 2 months of the season, and then he just flipped a switch and tapped into that potential, like you mentioned. And he had a .77 ERA in those 2 months. He had an 11 K per nine. He was absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, he wasn't even an all-star that year. You mentioned the first half of the season not being – he wasn't an all-star.
He was fine.
And finished 4th in Cy Young voting that season.
Yeah, because he was all right. He was a solid starter who I think the Cardinals knew that they had something in him. They didn't know when it would come out. And then in those final 2 months, it absolutely did. And he put on quite the show. And that 2019 season, I think, is why a lot of organizations probably called about him around the deadline, including the Orioles, of course, because they knew that they could probably still get something out of him. They know that that's still in there because this guy is clearly capable of flipping the switch. We've seen it before.
Right.
And you mentioned his hits per nine. His whip that year led the National League, like you mentioned. It wasn't because of his walk numbers. It was because of his hit numbers. He was 34th in the National League in walk numbers, 3rd in hit numbers. Actually, excuse me, the major leagues.
Yeah.
So he just didn't allow hits, and that's why he was so effective. So, and the Orioles, an organization that typically look for guys who can control the ball and control the strike zone. If they take a chance on this guy and they think they can, get out of him what the Cardinals did at the back end of 2019, he's going to be crazy effective.
Right.
Crazy effective.
And, of course, the biggest question there is just what is different from 2019.
Yeah.
So in 2020, it's the weird 2020 season.
Discount that.
It's a wash. 2021, he was good, but injuries started to happen. He made 17 appearances, 15 starts, had a 3.22 ERA. It's a good ERA. In 2022, he only has 9 appearances, 8 of them starts, a 4.25 ERA. So first he has the oblique injury in 2021, and then the shoulder injuries start piling up. He's got a shoulder injury later in 2021, and then shoulder injuries 2 more times in 2022. So obviously, hard to find a rhythm when you're not pitching much at all in 2020 because it was 2020. You're not pitching much in 2021. You're not pitching much in 2022. So entering 2023, that's 3 previous seasons where staying on the field has been a struggle for one reason or another. And again, hard to find a rhythm when you are pitching so infrequently. Yeah.
I mean, especially when you have shoulder injuries and you don't exactly know how it's going to feel the next time you throw a baseball.
Right.
So, cut him some slack in that regard, but also give him a ton of credit for coming back and being effective when he has been. So, as an Oriole fan, obviously he wasn't as effective in his first 2 starts than he was last night, but we know that he's got it because those first 2 starts were really, really darn good, 8 Ks in each of them. So I'd be pumped about this guy.
Let's talk about the fastball.
Okay.
In 2019, Jack Flaherty's 4-seam fastball had a run value of 22. It graded out as one of the best pitches in the sport that year. In 2023, the 4-seam fastball has a run value in the negatives. The spin rate on the fastball has actually been better this season than it was in 2019. So if you're asking yourself, well, what is the difference? If the spin rate has been better this season, it's the velocity. In 2019, the fastball velocity was hovering right around 94. It was at 93.8 to be exact. This season, it's right around 92. So the fastball velocity has been a massive difference for Flaherty. And maybe the Orioles can unlock something there. Because looking at Flaherty's numbers, the two biggest takeaways that I had were velocity and extension.
Yeah.
Extension isn't really something that you can teach. Extension has a lot to do with, height, athleticism, wingspan, all that stuff that you just cannot teach. So there is a certain ceiling to it. However, we have seen the ceiling on the extension from Jack Flaherty. In previous years, in his rookie season, he was in the 99th percentile in extension. In 2019, he was in the 94th percentile in extension. Now he's down to the 83rd percentile, which is still pretty good. He's still a very athletic pitcher, but if you're not getting that same extension, your four-seam fastball isn't going to be as effective. And with the velocity, it's kind of funny. Take this for what it's worth, but when you kind of scroll through Twitter at this point, when people are posing the question of what starters are going to pitch for the Orioles in the playoffs and what guys can be effective, the answers are second half Bradish, post call-up Grayson, and higher fastball velocity Flaherty, which is a very simple way of putting it. But if the Orioles can get more fastball velocity out of Jack Flaherty and make that a more effective pitch, somewhat closer to what it was in 2019, this is a different pitcher. And yes, Jack Flaherty had a blow-up start last night. It happens. It happens to the best pitchers in baseball. Everybody has blow-up starts every once in a while. It's a long season. Not worried about it. But in his first two outings, the fastball velocity was better. He was touching 94 pretty consistently. He was getting up to 96, 97 when he really needed to. I think against the Astros, he had a 97-mile-an-hour fastball against Yordan Alvarez because he just kind of emptied the tank on it. Big AB there. If the Orioles can get that fastball velocity out of Jack Flaherty, whew.
Which clearly they can.
Yeah.
And they did it with his first start.